presented by the Minister of Finance and Economic Development. This is on ARC drought response, which is a cost insurance policy agreement, and the World Food Programme replica policy. Following the presentation by the Minister of Finance and Economic Development, Cabinet approved the signing of the insurance policy agreement between Africa Risk Capacity Limited, ARC, and the Government of Zimbabwe, as well as the Memorandum of Understanding between the Government of Zimbabwe, the World Food Programme, and ARC Limited. The African Risk Capacity Agency seeks to provide participating member states of the African Union with access to financial resources to help them to respond to extreme weather events. The agency has caused the establishment of an affiliated financial entity, the African Risk Capacity Insurance Company Limited, to provide insurance coverage, risk pooling, and transfer services to ARC member states. Cabinet was informed that government, through Treasury, would purchase a drought insurance premium of $1 million, which will unlock a maximum coverage of $5.3 million. Furthermore, the World Food Programme will pay a premium amount of $200,000, which will unlock a maximum coverage of $1 million. And this is for the coming 2019-20 season. Cabinet notes that the country will benefit in terms of ARC coverage, because in times of drought, this will also help by preparing and putting in place necessary measures towards drought mitigation and early response to save the vulnerable populace. Then Cabinet also received a progress update on the implementation of the fourth 100-day cycle priority projects. The first to present was the Industry of Commerce. The Minister informed Cabinet as follows: that the concept note on the Chirundu one-stop border post evaluation has been developed and agreed. Improved efficiency at the border post will enhance trade between Zimbabwe and Zambia. Also, consumer awareness campaigns to encourage consumers to raise complaints against unfair service providers using media platforms are being conducted through National FM radio. 7 national quality forums have been set up in Masvingo, Beitbridge, Mutare, Marondera, Bulawayo, and Gweru and Victoria Falls. The forums are aimed at sensitizing the public on the need to choose quality products and thereby encourage their production. The other project of the paper recycling and value chain project is already underway in Harare as part of the efforts to increase capacity utilization for paper recycling companies. And also preparations for the drafting of a statutory instrument on imports management to limit the influx of imported goods into the country are also on course. Then the next report on the fourth 100-day target was presented by the Minister of Information, Communication Technology, Postal and Courier Services, Dr. Mswere. The Minister informed Cabinet as follows: site scoping and deployment of furniture and local area networks at all the 5 community information centers. They've been established in Manicaland, Mashonaland West, Midlands, and Masvingo Province, and they actually have been completed. Internet service have since been launched at 3 of these 5 information centers, while procurement of outstanding ICT equipment is in progress at all those 5 CICs. Consumer education and awareness campaigns meant to increase knowledge on ICTs and cybersecurity have been conducted in Chiredzi, Triangle, Rutenga, Neshuro, Renkomine in Masvingo Province, and Mapanzure in Midlands Province. And also 3 new 3G base stations have been commissioned under the Shared Infrastructure Base Stations project in Harare and Manicaland Province. And the other project is the establishment of a national research and education network. This is in order to increase solutions for industrial development at tertiary institutions and this is actually at an advanced stage, with 6 institutions already connected to the internet. The institutions include Mutare Teachers College, the Scientific Industrial Research and Development Center, SIRGC, which is in Harare, Hillside Teachers College, Kwekwe Polytechnic, Marymount Teachers College, and the Zimbabwe Open University. Then a third presentation on the fourth 100-day cycle was presented by the Minister of Lands, Agriculture, Water, and Rural Resettlement, Honorable Perence Shiri. The Minister informed Cabinet as follows: that installation of 8 by 40 hectare center pivot irrigation units under the Irrigation Development Project has been completed. 2 of the 3 contracts also on solar power generation and pumping stations have been signed for the Kanyemba irrigation scheme. And also equipment worth US 20 million intended for the mechanization development project is now in Durban, awaiting the letter of credit and guarantee from the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe and the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development. Then the other project is on the rabies disease control program. About 46,000 dogs out of the targeted 50,000 dogs have been vaccinated countrywide. Then the last but not least of the projects of the fourth 100-day cycle of the Ministry of Lands is pertaining to relief payment to former farm owners. Treasury has since released US $53 million, and 100 former white farmers have been compensated. That brings us to the fourth presentation, which was done by the Minister of Mines and Mining Development, Honorable Chitando. The Minister informed Cabinet as follows: that the expansion of the granite cutting and polishing plant at Shuowin in Mashonaland East is at 80% completion, and assessment for market pricing has been completed. Then on the second one, targets set for the Karo Platinum Exploration Project in Mashonaland West Province have been met, and civil construction work for the establishment of the Jinan low carbon ferrochrome furnace in Midlands Province is 80% complete. These are some of the projects aimed at achieving the 12 billion target, the 1 billion target for the ferrochrome industry. Then the Minister of Finance and Economic Development, Professor Mthuli Ncube, gave also his report on the fourth 100-day cycle. The Minister informed Cabinet as follows: with regards to resource mobilization, about 6 billion RTGS has been realized from tax revenue. 6 billion has been realized from tax revenue out of the targeted 6.6 billion. On expenditure targets, adjustments had to be effected as a result of the prevailing negative economic environment, with RTGS 3.05 billion having been disbursed against a target of RTGS 7.68 billion as follows: salaries, RTGS 1.7 billion, social spending, RTGS 64.6 million, social services, and capital spending, RTGS 1.25 billion. With regards to financial re-engagement, 7 out of 9 staff monitored structural benchmark targets have been met, including under smart agriculture financing. Then the next presentation was done by the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Trade. That's Dr. S.B. Moyo. Following presentation by the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Trade, Cabinet noted with satisfaction that efforts to portray the country's image in good light are yielding results. The Anti-Sanctions Day was commemorated on the 25th of October 2019, and a concept paper was produced and circulated to all Zimbabwean missions for onward transmission to host governments. This was done in October. Also, Zimbabwe, as chair of the SADC organ on defense and politics, has successfully led the SADC team observer elections in Mozambique, Botswana, Mauritius, and Namibia, which were conducted peacefully. Zimbabwe is set to receive an additional 53 million euro under the country's national indicative program for the period 2014 to 2020, targeting the health and agricultural sectors. Then we received as cabinet, the cabinet considered and approved the Medical Services Amendment Bill 2019, which was presented by the Minister of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs, who is the chairman of the Committee on Legislation. The minister informed Cabinet that the Medical Services Amendment Bill 2019 is intended to align the Medical Services Act, Chapter 15.13, with the Constitution under the ongoing legislative reform programs which is being pursued by the Second Republic. The amendment primarily seeks to safeguard and promote the right of every citizen and permanent resident of Zimbabwe to access basic health care services, including reproductive health care, the right of every person to emergency medical treatment in any health institution, and the right of every child to health care services. In particular, the amendment accords priority to the rights of persons over 70 years, persons living with disabilities, and veterans of the liberation struggle to access medical attention. Then Cabinet also considered and approved the Memorandum of Understanding between the Republic of Zimbabwe and the African Union Sports Council Region 5 on cooperation in the establishment of a sport museum in Harare. And this was presented by the Minister of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs, once again as the chairperson of the Committee on Legislation. The Minister informed Cabinet that in its endeavor to preserve the sporting culture and heritage of its member states, the African Union Sports Council, AUSC, which is Region 5, formerly known as the Supreme Council for Sport in Africa Zone 6, has come up with a grand project to capture the historic achievements that form the legacy of the region. It is envisaged that such a project will elevate the rich and unique sporting history of the region by immortalizing the achievements of persons who have performed with distinctions across various sporting disciplines. Africa's Region 5 will thus establish, capture, and manage all its historic milestones and proud moments in their original nature and exhibit them as a way of preserving the region's identity and heritage. The unanimous choice of Zimbabwe to host the museum again provides ample testimony that the country is without doubt the envy of the region in terms of the hospitality of its people as well as their sporting excellency. Zimbabwe itself will benefit immensely through sport tourism, infrastructure development through the museum, and the promotion of sport, sport education, culture, and also information preservation. Numerous employment opportunities will arise as we set up and manage exhibitions. As such, demand for our curators, historians, artists, designers, tour guides, and administrative staff will certainly grow. Then Cabinet also received a report on the 2019 Investment for Africa Forum, which was hosted by Egypt, and this was presented by the Minister of Lands, Agriculture, Water and Rural Resettlement, who attended this investment forum from the 22 to the 23rd November. The Investment for Africa Forum provides a unique Pan-African platform that brings together Africa heads of state and governments, prominent regional and international investors, as well as international financial institutions. The forum deliberated on Africa's abundant opportunities and explored means of utilizing the continent's vast human and natural resources towards achieving self-sufficiency and the continent's industrial transformation. Cabinet took note that the Afrexim Bank, which has always stood by Zimbabwe, demonstrated a commitment towards supporting the implementation of the Africa Free Trade Area Agreement in order to increase inter-Africa trade. In that regard, the bank set aside US $35 billion to bridge the funding gap in intra-Africa trade, and has already disbursed US $15 billion in that regard. US $15 billion in that regard. Zimbabwe's participation in the 4th Investment Forum demonstrated the country's commitment to building closer economic and trade ties with other regional countries in the spirit of operationalizing the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. Then we got an update on the industrial action by doctors and City of Harare nurses. The Minister of Health and Childcare updated Cabinet on the industrial action by public hospital doctors as well as City of Harare nurses. He indicated that 46 dismissed doctors had presented themselves for work at various institutions following the moratorium extended by His Excellency the President to the doctors who were dismissed. The moratorium lapsed on 1st December 2019, and the Cabinet decided that it would not be extended as this would negatively affect patients. Cabinet resolved that discussions on conditions of service would only be held with those doctors who are at work. Cabinet further noted with satisfaction that the construction of flats for lease to doctors had commenced in Harare. 2 blocks of medium-density flats will be constructed at all the country's hospitals on a phased approach. That brings me to the end of the presentation of the 43rd matrix, and I thank you very much.
Madam Chair, the situation, yes, with regards to those who listened to the call of His Excellency, we've had 46 who came back. And these 46, if they were dismissed, they are no longer dismissed. They are now reinstated. And the process was that they would present themselves at their place of work, original place of work, and then to sign the assumption of duty form. It's just a signature, because they were not at work all the time, and therefore an assumption of duty has to be filled in order to record that someone has come back to work. That's the only way you can be able to be back on the records and to be placed, under the SSB pay sheet. So assumption of duty forms is a necessity, was a necessity in order to be able to reinstate someone to their original position. So that is what has happened. In total, out of the 448, so 46 have come back, leaving that outstanding balance of 402. For some reason, if some of those doctors had not presented, and if they got a good case as to why they hadn't been able to present themselves by yesterday at 8:30, that will be looked at. The Cabinet wants the doctors back at work. Cabinet does not want to see any more suffering of the patients. Cabinet does not want to see people dying, and that is why His Excellency presented that moratorium. And the situation is that, according to Cabinet, discussions and requests, for improving remuneration, conditions of service, should be ongoing while people are at work. And that is precisely what that moratorium was awarded. by His Excellency. So that, people are at work and discussion can be held. Cabinet can therefore be able to be discussing with people who are at work rather than people who are not at work. So, as the chairperson has indicated, the Cabinet has directed that there be discussions with those who are at work. So that is what the status quo is, the situation is. Yes, you're quite right. Government has tried all it can. Government has, from the very top of government, given that moratorium for people to come back. Yes, it has been a situation where negotiations have to carry on, but the goodwill from the doctors should also have been that His Excellency has extended that moratorium period. Let's go back to work and be able to negotiate, while we're at work, as has been indicated by His Excellency and Cabinet. That moratorium, was a very good sign. Was a sign of fatherhood, on the part of the President, and he showed that fatherhood. And he showed the nation that he wants his doctor to come back to work. And we should just respect that. And so, like I said, if there's any doctors who might not have been able to come because of extenuating circumstances, they can always put it in writing, but the situation is as is. The moratorium is not extended. So what will government do next? Government will go back to the status quo, which is where we had been given the opportunity by the moratorium. The status quo was that all doctors that were not at work, I want to repeat that very clearly, all doctors that were not at work would have to follow the labor court ruling. That is what the status quo was. All doctors that were not at work and had not presented themselves within the 48 hours, would have to go through the disciplinary action. And the disciplinary action yielded dismissals as the outcome. And then there's also the other 57 senior doctors who were allowed, to carry on at work without any hassles. So they should also be taking advantage of that situation and be back at work. So it leaves the 402 doctors who have been dismissed. It means that we're going back to that status quo because the moratorium has passed. The period has now passed. And however, as I indicated, government will continue negotiating with those doctors who are at work. Once we have come back to work, government will continue discussing and entering discussions with them. And that is what the status quo, and that is what government will do next. I hope I've made it clear. And I want to re-emphasize again, we've always been very appreciative of all those senior doctors who were providing emergency work, and we will continue appreciating all the doctors right through the country who have been providing service, saving lives, including those doctors working at the mission hospitals. We are very appreciative of the work that they are doing. So it's now a situation where government will, as it has always indicated, will negotiate with those doctors who are at work and listen to them. I would have been very happy, well, we would have been very happy if those doctors who are living within the institutional residences would have come to work, the incapacitation in terms of transport, they are in government accommodation and at the hospital accommodation and the institutional accommodation. So if there was something amiss which made them unavailable to be able to report for duty, I think there would have to be a reason for an extenuating circumstance as to why they would want to be considered. I think the moratorium was a very useful moratorium because it cancelled the whole issue of applying for the jobs and should have been taken advantage of. The other pending disciplinary issues, as I indicated, the only major disciplinary issues which were pending were those relating to the senior doctors. The senior doctors had not been fired by the Health Services Board. They had merely been invited for hearings, and that was also to rest. So they are in the clear. So we have a situation where we have to go back to the status quo in terms of the law. It's always the law, but we've got this moratorium which has helped everyone. So my final statement is that government, cabinet wants the doctors back at work, and that is why the president went all the way and awarded the moratorium. And therefore it is now up to the doctors to do what they have to do for those who have been dismissed. If they don't have any extenuating circumstances, it means that they have to apply to come back to work. That's the law. We're just following the law. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Obadiah Moyo. I think it's clear.
Of national housing and social amenities has got a very clear and specific mandate. The mandate is to provide functional human settlement, which speaks to Vision 2030. We have separated the mandate into segments. The first segment is the construction of institutional accommodation for health workers and doctors, institutional accommodation for teachers and other civil servants. Because of the nature of the health services environment, we have decided to give that a priority number one. So as we started embarking on the construction of institutional accommodation for health workers and doctors and nurses. We started with five hospitals, Paranyatwa being number one. We're going to be constructing brand new blocks of flats, 5-story and 4 stories, middle-income blocks of flats at Paranyatwa Hospital. We also, at the same time, go to Salimugabe, formerly Harare Hospital, construct 2 blocks of similar nature as well. We go to Bulawayo, Mpilo Hospital, and the United Bulawayo Hospitals. That is the phase 1 of the construction program. The phase 2 will target all the provincial general hospitals. Then we move to district hospitals. So there's going to be a massive uplift of the phases of our hospitals in terms of accommodation for our staff. We have decided to construct within the cantonment of the hospitals to ease the effects of transport, to ease the cost of transport for the junior doctors, for the nurses, and for all other health services employees. We, as providers of shelter, and we're all aware that shelter is not just a policy, but it is enshrined in the Constitution. It's a human right. We are going to look at the urban areas in terms of facelifting, speaking to Vision 2030. We move to peri-urban areas, we move to resettlement areas, we also move to rural areas. We are developing a concept of which we want to be, by 2030, we will have human settlements in the rural areas without pit latrines, without wells, but with running water, septic tanks, and soak away. That's what we're focusing on. We do the same with resettlement areas. Coming to urban areas, we have an issue with illegal settlements. I think it's important that we discuss it. Illegal settlements are a thing of the past. We are not going to be demolishing people's houses. That is not the agenda. We are going to be regularizing those that are in existence. Of course, in the regularization process, there are those that will stand in the way of a road. There are those that will stand in the way of water and sewer reticulation systems. Those will obviously have to go, but we will provide alternative accommodation for those that will be affected. So in a nutshell, Honorable Chair, that is the agenda from the Ministry of National Housing and Social Amenities.
That is the efforts which are...
Thank you very much, SlyMedia, for that question. That is what has been said, but I also want to indicate that at the time when we were talking, with the doctors, at the times when we discussed, we've categorized the issues that can be done immediately. And the issues that can be taken care of immediately by government include, number one, the issue of transport, provision of transport. Number two, the issue of accommodation outside the institutions. Those are immediate because we have already identified some flats which are going to be renovated, make them comfortable, for the doctors to be able to occupy them. And at the same time, we've also talked about giving them fuel. We've said, we'll be able to work out, a fuel budget, so that we can be able to give all our healthcare workers fuel at the institutions where they work, especially at the central hospitals. They already got petrol facilities, facilities for providing fuel. And we've said that we're going to be improving the accommodation which currently exists at the institutions, and also make it cozy and comfortable for someone who will be working for long hours. Lounges, where they can also spend some time with Wi-Fi, everything being made available. We've already made all those arrangements. So the issue of medicines, like I indicated before, those are issues where we have been on a continuous, on a weekly basis, accumulating, the amount of medicines, in our institutions. So the medicines are coming through. If they were to go back to work, they would have, some medicines available, syringes, surgical supplies. We've also gone to tender, for all these other surgical and medicines. These have matured, and within a very short space of time, we should be able to receive, these products. Equipment will take a bit longer, for us to have it, and they also acknowledge the same, that it cannot just happen overnight. Number one, we have to identify the foreign currency. Number two, we have to get the consultants themselves, to identify the pieces and prove that they are the correct paraphernalia, for their use. So that is the situation. That is really the situation. I don't know if that's satisfactory, right? Thank you very much for agreeing with me.
Thanks, Minister. Minister, then the next question is...
the full complement, I'll start with you. The full complement of doctors, since you say that I hadn't answered it before, is 1,603. Okay? And out of that, that's where the 402 are coming out of. So that answers you. And then the next issue was the effects of the industrial action, isn't it? Yeah. Once again, I want to emphasize that government from the beginning has been saying, let's come back to work, right? And the workers found it difficult to come to work, even though we should have had some cover, from those who live within the institutions, right? So the absence of a huge number naturally would also affect the normal outcome. We would have better outcomes. Naturally, with the reduction of the number of doctors who should be attending to the patients, the outcome would be bad. So the absence of the doctors has caused totally the horrid situation. Government has said, let's be at work and negotiate while we're at work. And we got to the stage of where the doctors had to be fired because the doctors were not coming to work. The doctors were not coming to work. That is the truth. And they were not coming to work. They are not coming to work because the deaths. And I always want to repeat, the doctors who were fired are the ones who were not coming to work. That's my theme today. And at the same time, those same doctors were also given the opportunity to come back to work by the President's moratorium. And they still didn't come back to work.
Okay, thank you, Minister. I think you tried to tackle those questions. I now have...
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Travis, for the question. Yes, there was a bit of a glitch from last week regarding fuel. It was a different side of the situation where there were efforts to roll over the overseas. And so that that existed post the issues that we see coming to us. But NOIC has since increased the pace at which it has been collecting fuel from Asasa, and we ask them to work 24/7 until the situation has been regularized. So we're still going through the motions of ensuring that there's sufficient fuel in the service stations, with a view to ensuring that the public does not spend a period of time in queues. Now, coming to power, I think we've discussed this story before many a time. We're in a situation where our infrastructure is really antiquated, so it breaks down on a day-to-day basis, and our engineers work 24/7 to bring the machines up. And so a number of those machines, by coincidence, collapsed during the past week, resulting in power outages. But some of them were leaks and so forth, so the entire part that is affected is then brought down for repairs. But as I've said before, as government, we have no doubt whatsoever that we are in the process of being on top of this situation. And we do have many projects that are kicking in. Many of these units are under repair. And we believe that in the first quarter of next year, we should see a substantial improvement in the area of power. The inconvenience is close to the public.
Thank you, Minister. And
Thank you, Honorable Chair. The construction budget, what we have looked at is completely different. It's a paradigm shift from what we are used to. We are going to be including the actual houses of the flats in the budget. We are going to include off-site and on-site infrastructure, which is water, sewer, and road network, internal road network. We are also going to include alternative sources of energy, to the solar energy systems, to be part of that construction program. We are going to be having mini supermarkets, the provision of groceries and things like that. We're going to have recreational facilities like gym facilities within that cantonment area. So we worked out our figures, and that holistic budget came up to about 160 million Zimbabwean dollars. Thank you.
And I'm just left to thank you and